know, non-stop Vikings talk. It's Purple Daily on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
Nothing like a Friday night news dump. Judd, you were like, were you like front row at Target Field, or what was your?
I was in the company seats, my man. I was in the I was in the company seats, so I was third row behind the dugout. I think it was third row. Very, very nice night too. Of course, Twins got 4 hits.
Did you like win did you enter your name in the weekly drawing, or did a higher up come to you and say, "Wow, you did such a good job on"?
I asked
Purple
actually.
Daily.
No, I just asked because it was the Cubs. I said, because I am to go back to the, much like you, WGN days. So I asked and got a response. Do you want these tickets? And I'm like, oh, okay, sure, I'll take them.
Wow, look at you.
I'll take them. Yeah.
So Jub was enjoying basically sitting within arm's reach of Carlos Correa last night.
Mm-hmm.
Old Macadac was enjoying his Friday night in deck. So we did see a couple people like, where's the emergency episode last night? Like, don't drop news on a Friday night after the draft season's over. We're trying to decompress a little bit around here.
We're not going home. Like, we're not abandoning ship to go home and do an emergency unless it's like on a Friday night, I should say, a Justin Jefferson or Kirk Cousins.
And we've been foreshadowing the Zadarius Smith thing for weeks and months anyway, so it's not that shocking, I guess.
I would say if the tweet said Kirk Cousins, there's an agreement for a trade to the San Francisco 49ers, then we leave.
Yeah. Sorry.
Then we leave where we're at, and I tell Dawn, hey, I got to go. But, yeah.
But you can stay here third row.
Exactly. Zadarius Smith does not meet the threshold.
So, okay, we'll dive into it here, but the show is presented by our friends at TCL, one of the world's best-selling consumer electronics brands. They have a new lineup of award-winning TVs delivering the most entertainment with stunning resolution at an affordable cost. Enjoy more of the things you love at TCL. TCL.com. Inspire greatness with TCL. So, yes, the Minnesota Vikings last night, we've been kind of wondering, when's the next shoe going to drop? You got Zadarius, Dalvin, Danielle Hunter. They need to clear some cap space to sign their first-round pick, Jordan Addison, so something had to give here. And so as we know it, now there's some rumblings that maybe the Vikings are going to eat some of the money on this, but I don't think those full details have come out yet.
Right.
Zadarius Smith to the Cleveland Browns. And the other tentacles here, the Vikings wind up getting, it's essentially 2 day 3 pick swaps in 2024 and 25. So the Vikings will give up a 6th and a 7th, and they will get back a 5th and a 5th. So they upgrade their draft positioning by a round or 2 in 2024 and 2025. They say goodbye to, even with the injuries and the lack of productivity down the stretch, he was still one of the 10 best edge rushers statistically in the NFL last year. The biggest thing is probably just the cap ramifications. So I'm going to pull up the boop, 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 boop over the cap calculator here. Got Zadarius Smith. We are going to trade pre-June 1st, which means the Vikings save $12.1 million. They go from having $1.1 million in cap space to $13 million in cap space for this year. And then for next year, they go from having $24 million in cap space to having $45 million in cap space.
Oh, next year's going to be.
And then Dalvin Cook's going to come off the books too for next year. So they're going to, now they might, I guess there's a lot of questions about, okay, are you going to fill that with a TJ Hawkinson extension, Danielle Hunter? So I don't know. Do you think this was a good trade? Let's start there.
I think it was a good move to find a way to get rid of cap space. And so the Vikings definitely are kept some of the salary that Zadarius is going to make, because Mary Kay Cabot of the Cleveland Plain Dealer had a source, I'm going to guess from the Browns, who told her that, and she's very good and plugged in. The dead cap is $3.3 million on the Vikings, but I think that this was a good trade from the perspective of you have to clear this space. And Zadarius Smith wasn't almost certainly, much like Dalvin Cook, coming back. So like these to me are inevitable moves. And if you can get a couple picks and you have to send a couple picks and you upgrade a little bit, that's fine too. But I think the most important thing was finding a way to get him off the roster and free up as much cap space as you could. What this trade though does prove is that, and I don't know So there's a lot of guys internally for the Vikings that get this. I don't know in Kwesi's world if this makes sense yet, but Zadarius Smith's production before he hurt the knee was pretty damn good. And so I think Kwesi might have a feeling that he can get more value for veteran players than he probably can. Like ultimately, Zadarius Smith is worth, because of age and his background with back problems too, Phil.
Yeah.
He's not worth that much. But I think as far as, and it's interesting that Kwesi did this deal with Browns top executive Andrew Berry, who is Kwesi's good friend. So it's almost like, okay, hey guy, take this guy. And he's like, okay. But I think that this much like the Cook move is an absolute necessity.
I'm kind of torn on this one. At the end of the day, I understand not wanting to move forward with a 31-year-old banged up, probably on the downside of his career edge rusher. I think you probably got the best 10-game stretch of the end of his career.
Right.
I do think he can still be productive, but there's a good chance he gets banged up again. He had an elbow thing, a knee thing. He's not cooked by any means. I understand wanting to sell high on him. I'm a little shocked at just the lack of draft capital you're able to get. Like, you're telling me you couldn't just trade him for just a 5th-round pick? That it has to be... I agree with you. I think Kwesi probably overestimated. He probably thought, well, we'll get like a 4th or 5th-round pick at worst for a guy that was the top pressure edge rusher in the NFL until the bone bruise. Mm-hmm. This is actually a great trade for the Browns if you think about it. So the Browns are like, okay, so we just have to move back a little bit on the 3rd day of the draft in 2024 and 2025, and we get 1 year of Zadarius Smith, and we're trying to win the division. I mean, the people laugh at the Browns, but Deshaun Watson full season, Kevin Stefanski is a pretty good head coach. That's a division that is going to be probably tightly contested. I think the Browns are probably pretty definitively 4th right now, but like they're trying to win 9 games, maybe go to the playoffs in a tough AFC.
Yep.
And for basically nothing, right? They don't give up draft capital. They just give up draft positioning on the 3rd day, and they get Zadarius Smith. On the Viking side, I understand their plight to try and create flexibility beyond 2023. Because if this was just about 2023, my argument would have been, well, wait a second. You could have just cut Zadarius around the league year and then had an extra, $12 million in 2023 free agency money to go spend on somebody. Maybe you could have gotten another linebacker or something. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Would that money have been more valuable 3 months ago, 2 months ago, leading into the free agency period? Or would you rather have the upgraded, hey, bounce from the 6th round to the 5th round, 7th round? Now, and because I get it, maybe there wasn't a trade to be made. I think if Kwesi could have made a trade 2 months ago, I think he would have.
Yes, I agree.
It looks to me like there was just nothing available, or teams wanted to get through free agency and draft and then see what happened. So,
right.
I don't know. This isn't like a heist for the Vikings by any means. I don't think it's a bad trade, but I think the salary cap space would have been nice to have a couple months ago.
I think Smith came here, and keep in mind too, it got wonky for him last year when his agreement with Baltimore, and we still don't know all the details of that one fell through. And I think, Phil, to your point, I think the Vikings, when they signed Zadarius last year, are very much in the predicament that the Browns are now, and what you're talking about, which is come in, play a year, try and get a lot of sacks. But I don't know. I feel like the discussion about, and yes, they put up good stats, but I feel like the discussion about Dalvin Cook and Zadarius and aging players like that it's not like different sports where there's like a locker room, right? A veteran mentality value to them. I just think it's a reality of this league that aging players like that aren't going to get you much. The one interesting question about this, and I have no clue, I've not heard a thing, but the one interesting thing, like in trying to come up with a theories of why the Vikings were buying time for a guy that almost certainly looked to be gone, does this mean something is closer with Danielle Hunter as well?
Yeah.
Because that was my only thought, was what they didn't pull the trigger on what you're talking about because of potential. Because if Danielle had forced his way out by now, I think you got kind of probably go back to Z and be like, hey, baby, let's do it again. Let's roll it back. Let's give you 2 more years. Yeah. So this does bring up a question for me about, and what's so intriguing about this, Phil, is it's all behind the scenes, right? Like the Danielle Hunter steam is 0. And
Yeah,
and I
his,
feel
agent,
like,
his agent doesn't leak stuff. Yeah.
and we've talked about it a ton, but it's still not there. And so does this mean that something is closer on that front? And if so, and if it's going to be a positive, an extension, good. But it's just among my theories is I wonder if that is in the offing now.
So let's go down that path for a second. Okay, now that the first domino has fallen, Za'Darius is gone. No longer do you get to maybe trade Danielle Hunter for like a second round pick and then fall back on Za'Darius for another year. Za'Darius is gone. You have Marcus Davenport, so you've got now Marcus had a half sack last year, but he was top 20 in pressure. So you just hope that the pressures and the process that he puts forth leads to better results on the sack side. But I think front offices would tell you too that, hey, give me a guy that generates a handful of pressures a game, because that's going to disrupt the team's passing game. The sacks are a little bit more of a vanity stat than people probably think.
Yes.
But do you pay Danielle Hunter now? Are you more likely, if you're Kwesi at this point, he's going to be 29 years old, so he's teetering on the edge of the prime years of an edge rusher. You can still be productive, and Za'Darius Smith showed that at age 30 last year. But do you say, all right, fine, let's do it, Danielle, we're gonna pay you big time money for age 29, age 30, and then maybe create some sort of an out once you get to the third year of that contract?
Mm-hmm. I wonder if this means that they're closer. Like, that's the first thing that comes to mind. I also think that in the case of Danielle, it's going to have to make sense for both sides. So and this is, again, I am highly speculative about what the Vikings are going to do, because there is not a pattern yet, like there was for Rick. There's not for Kwesi yet. But I wonder if what this means is that they have come closer, that the deal makes sense for both sides. Because, at the end of the day, if you can get Danielle, you want him. Like, I have no interest in just like screw him. Like with Cook, it's been a nice run. Dalvin, we'll see you later. Bye. Thielen, same thing. Danielle, ideally you keep. Do I pay him? Do I get him into like the top 3? If he comes to me and says, I want to be, or I deserve to be in the top 3 edge rushers in this league, do I think that the Vikings say yes? No. If you come to an agreement on what's a very reasonable and still lucrative contract, then I say yes, especially if it's for 2 to 3 years. So that's what I wonder, if how their valuations are going with him, Phil, if they're in a spot where they feel comfortable and it's going to get done. And so consequently, the Za'Darius insurance policy can be cut.
Yeah. I think you're right on that. This does seem like, and there's been really no rumblings about Danielle being unhappy at this point. I think that would probably trickled out at some point. My guess is, back in the early part of the offseason, the Vikings went to Danielle and said, hey, we're going to make something happen here. We know you're not going to play on the 40th ranked base salary of edge rushers, so we'll make something happen. By the way, so his current cap hit, just for some context, is 4th on the team. It's a $13 million cap hit, but that's just the accounting. His base salary this year is $4.9 million. That's what he's going to be looking at, saying, I'm not going to play for $4.9 million. So $13 million cap hit. The top edge rushers in the NFL, TJ Watt, Joey Bosa, Myles Garrett, Khalil Mack, Max Crosby, in terms of salary, make an average of 28, 27, 25, 23, and $23 million. I think that's the range. If you're Danielle and the agent, I think that's the range you're eyeing. I think realistically, you're not going to get the, TJ Watt, Joey Bosa. Those guys are just kind of on a different level at this point. But you're going to aim for like $20 to $25 million a year. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm okay with 2 years of that, and cross your fingers on his health. So, and I don't know, maybe they needed some of that money. Say goodbye to Za'Darius Smith, because I don't know if you can do that contract and lower Danielle's $13 million cap hit unless you shove a lot of money into void years, or maybe it's like a fake 5-year contract that has 2 years of guarantees. But there's another shoe to drop here as well that fits in here. I'm going to go back to the cap calculator. Boop, 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 boop. Over the cap. So if you trade Dalvin Cook or cut Dalvin Cook post June 1st, let's see if I think both are, if you cut or trade him. Actually, you know what? If you trade him post June 1st, you save $11 million to the cap. If you cut him post June 1st, you save $9 million, because you'd be on the hook for the $2 million injury bonus.
Okay.
The injury and roster bonuses, those go along with the player to the new team. If you trade them, if you cut them, you're on the hook for those
Yeah, it's
bonuses.
yours.
Yep.
Okay.
So if you find a way to trade Dalvin Cook for like a 5th or a 6th round pick, let's do a post June 1st here. Boop, 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 boop. You now have $24 million in 2023 cap savings and $58 million in 2024 cap space.
Interesting. So my guess on the potential for a Dalvin trade and the Za'Darius news reported last night is that the Vikings would probably and are probably swallowing some of that bonus that Za'Darius got, and I bet you that they would put themselves on the hook in a trade for the $2 million. So I bet you their savings will be about $9 million regardless. Because if I'm a team, here's the problem with both of their contracts. You probably saw this, but Za'Darius immediately agreed to like a new 1-year contract in Cleveland, right? Nobody in their right mind is going to pay Dalvin Cook his salary that he's due.
Yes.
So they're going to say, dude, we'll take you, but we are going to do a new contract. And at that point in time, they're also not going to tell the Vikings, hey, you know what? We'll just pay that extra $2 million. So
yeah,
I bet you what the Vikings did was swallowed hard with Cleveland and took on some of the bonus that Za'Darius got, and Dalvin is going to be the same thing. But still, if you can get a day 3 draft pick, it's not that you're going to execute that pick. It's that at least then you've got something that you can package in trades.
Yeah, and it's not much because so they picked up an extra 5th rounder in a trade back, in the draft a couple weeks ago. But they still, if you really want to move up at some point for a quarterback in the 1st round, having an extra 5th round pick or two probably isn't going to.
I'm just saying, like a day 2 trade or a day 3 trade in itself, you can just move those. Like Kwesi clearly, and he might get too cute, but he loves those chips. Hey, I'll give you a couple of my 5th rounders, including the 2025. So, no, you're right. As far as an actual 1st round move up, I'm not trying to imply this is going to help the Vikings solve their quarterback problem.
Right. And actually, what's funny is because you kind of brought this up with the bloated contracts of Dalvin Cook and Darius Smith. Those crazy bloated contracts, like those guys aren't performing up to the number of dollars they're making or the cap number. And it kind of acts as a no trade clause in some ways.
Yeah.
Because you go, let's take Dalvin, for instance. You say, all right, we're going to take Dalvin to market. And everyone's like, boy, we'd love to have Dalvin for another year, but not at that price. And so then it becomes, okay, can you find a team that would be willing to take him and Dalvin would be interested in going and the two sides work out a renegotiated contract of some kind? There's reports that the Vikings actually had 2 or 3 other suitors for Za'Darius Smith. But if you're Za'Darius, you're looking around the room and saying, okay, well, whoever I go to, I'm going to want to make sure that I can become a free agent after the year, which is what he wanted, right? He wants to become a free agent now, but the compromise is, what if you play one more year on a reasonable deal,
right,
and then you become a free agent again?
Right. And
so it's like, can you find a trade partner that's willing to meet the salary demands of the player? Because they're not going to make the trade if Za'Darius is going to be like, well, I'm not coming to training camp. I'm not gonna play for that amount of money. So it's just, God, some of these contracts the Vikings got themselves into over the last couple of years. The Adam Thielen contract where they just had to eat like a $13 million dead cap penalty. Harrison Smith where you have to have a stare down at the table before the league year. Hey, man, we might cut you, but that's kind of what happens. So, but I guess my next question for you is, what are they going to do with like $20 million in 2023 cap space? Jordan Addison's cap number is going to be maybe 2.5 or 3 million.
Mm-hmm.
Are they gonna? Is it gonna be like a front loaded Danielle Hunter contract or something where they give him a big signing bonus, or they give him a big 1st year base salary or something? And they use some of that cap space? Or are there other free agents on the market? There's a couple edge rushers that are still kind of sitting out there. Or is there a trade on the horizon? Like it's just a lot of cap space to have 2 months after the league year is open, you know?
Yeah, well, first of all, I wonder if this also means that despite our assumptions for months that the Brian O'Neill contract is not going to be changed, because we've been talking about that as a logical possibility to sign the draft class.
Yeah.
This sort of gets them potentially off the hook for that. No, could they sign a guy, what's basically right now akin to a street free agent or two. Yeah, but that's not going to cost much. So here's my question. I would think that this probably involves more a Daniil extension. And keep in mind too, while Justin Jefferson's new contract is not going to officially kick in for 2 more years, I think you can play with that cap though. Like I think you could take more cap now for that. So like the accounting and the actual payments aren't the same, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So my guess is that we're talking probably more internal stuff now.
Well, I guess in retrospect, and maybe there's no way to sort of know how the offseason is going to play out, but would you have cleared that much of Kirk Cousins' contract into a void year in 2024
that's a good
if you knew you were eventually going to have like $20 million in cap space later on once the free agency dust settled? Because right now, if you're really looking to create flexibility, I don't think you can put the toothpaste back in the tube, but you pushed $28 million there was already like 10 on the books, but you pushed like $18 million in Kirk's contract accounting into 2024 when he's not under contract. I'd rather that just come off the books in 2023 if you've got the space, but too late now.
It's sort of weird because the Thielen decision did eat a ton of cap space up, and I love that one because it's like, okay, that's a lot of immediate pain, but then that pain is gone. The thing where I guess I'll sort of be a Vikings apologist is, from a cap standpoint, Brzezinski does a great job, as we've discussed before. I gotta think he's a really smart guy. I gotta think that he's not taken by surprise by, oh man, I wish I had known about this move.
Yeah.
In discussing the Zadarius Smith trade. So I gotta think there's more of a cap end game here. Like I feel like there's probably something we're not seeing.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like
it's
we won't know. Confusing.
Yeah, and we won't really know the full puzzle until the Dalvin piece comes in, the Daniil Hunter piece comes in, Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson. So I guess just to summarize the picture here, the Vikings got worse on defense today because Daniil Hunter or because Zadarius Smith is no longer on the team. I don't think you can just, he's aging, so let's get him out of here. I think they got worse on defense. Now, if Marcus Davenport comes in and is fantastic, awesome. They did improve their draft capital stash a little bit the next couple of years by upgrading from a 6th to a 5th and upgrading from a 7th to a 5th. And they drastically upgraded their cap situation in 2023 and 2024. So those are the three main takeaways that I have, I guess.
I think your point about Davenport is super intriguing, though. So, like, we get so hung up on sack stats, and half a sack is a bad year. So I'm not trying to make excuses here, but I think your point is spot on, which is it's going to be the pressure applied. Like for all the pressure that you get, statistically, you probably, as a ratio of that, don't get to the quarterback that much, like with actual sacks. But if you get pressure, and if you can make the life of your cornerbacks easier because the quarterback is panicking and throwing the ball, I think that becomes the most important thing. And as far as Smith goes, I mean, Zadarius Smith in the first 9 games through Buffalo was fantastic, just absolutely great. And after that, had, I think, 1/2 a sack. And so I would say this. I think for 2022, the Vikings and Zadarius Smith both got exactly what they bargained for. Like he's a veteran guy coming off a back problem. He got hobbled again, had a really good statistical year. But I also think that his loss can be compensated for. And if they're going, and if the decision here is partially, you know what, we are now in a position and we know it to keep Hunter, I'll take that. I'll take those two breaking up every day. If part of the equation is Daniil Hunter is going to stay here for at least 2 more years.
And I think I agree with everything you're saying. And my pushback to the Vikings would be, if you had plans to replace it, because it sounds like they were going to move on from Zadarius Smith 2 months ago. Zadarius put out the ode on, it sounds like they had a conversation early March. Hey, probably not going to happen financially, so I don't know how we're going to do it yet, but we're going to find a way to say goodbye to you. And that's why he put the social media post out, right? So if they knew back in early March they were going to replace him with a Marcus Davenport type, would it have made more sense to just cut him before the free agency window opened up to have extra money to spend on 25 and 26-year-old players? Or was it better for them to wait 2 months and get slightly better draft capital on day 3 of the 2024-25 drafts? I think that's, and maybe what happened was they thought we could cut him right now and get that money. We don't really need that money because we know we're gonna get a cornerback and an edge rusher, and we've got a plan,
Right?
And we think if we wait it out and we get to the summer period, we think that there's going to be a team desperate enough to just like give us a pick, like a 4th or a 5th round pick.
Right.
My sense is the Vikings thought they were going to get more for Zadarius Smith than they did, and this was kind of a meh fallback option for them. Not a train wreck, but I think the Vikings are a little underwhelmed with what transpired here. That's just my guess.
Well, and you don't make the bonus payment that they made to him in late March unless at least part of what you are saying is correct. Because like you could have just cut him before that, and that payment is now not your problem. So I think if there's one thing here that analytics might cover this and it might not. I think that the one thing to be learned here is that no matter what the production from a guy nearing or over the age of 30 in this league is, Phil, that you're not necessarily going to recoup that.
Yeah.
So like if you are, Dalvin Cook probably should be gone by now. Now, are you possibly going to get like a 6th round pick? Yes. Is it worth it? I don't know. Because to your point again, you're clearing cap space, and that's a good thing, especially to pursue guys in their 20s, guys coming out of their first contracts. But that's the one thing I don't know if the Vikings, like Brzezinski knows that. Grigson knows that, right? O'Connell does, but Kwesi's in charge, and I don't know that his system yet, except for personal experience, allows for, hey, this guy was really good and he was still productive in 2022, but ultimately, because of age and injury, you're not going to get much back. So it might be better to pull the ripcord in March.
Yeah. And by the way, one more thing on this. If they wind up trading Dalvin Cook post June 1st, and like you said, they might eat some of the money on Zadarius, so we don't know the exact financials, but they would be roughly in line to have the 11th most cap space of any team in the NFL in 2024.
Yep.
So they would put themselves in a much better position. But some of that's going to go away with a Hawkinson extension, a Danilo extension. It's going to be fluctuating. But
right.
Anyhow, all right. There's your all too deep dive breakdown into something that
you really want
thought was going to happen 2 or 3
Friday
months
night
ago.
and give you this? That's my question. Are you not entertained by the Saturday morning cartoon aspect?
Yes. So we're gonna hit you with 2 episodes today. This one, and we had a pre-planned Saturday checkdown episode that will drop sometime Saturday afternoon. So yeah, thanks for hanging out with us here. He's Judd. I'm Phil. Go enjoy a beverage of your choosing over the weekend here, and cheers one to Zadarius Smith. We hardly knew ye.